say he received 52% of the votes. Fifth, just as large numbers tend to impress, so small numbers tend to be overlooked. This means that you may openly discount a small number or minimize its importance. An example of this was supplied by Yugoslavia's Marshal Tito. In discussing political parties, Tito once observed that America has 2 political parties while Yugoslavia has 1. It is an insignificant difference because it is only a difference of 1. Theoretical constructs. There are, of course, many ways to classify beliefs, but for our purposes is it enough to divide beliefs into 2 large groups: A, raw data, and B, theory or theoretical constructs. Examples of raw data include such things as the names of people, the color of an automobile, the date, among other things. Raw data may be briefly characterized as any information that has, is, or might be checked by observation. Theoretical constructs, on the other hand, are not things one can check by simple observation. They are the product of intellectual activity and are freely used to help integrate raw data. In the previous section on statistics, we discussed statistics as raw data. In this section, we shall discuss theoretical constructs and their use. Let us sharpen the distinction by seeing how theoretical constructs are most effectively used, as in the domain of physical science. Scientists distinguish between observational terms, such as color, weight, pressure, and so on, which refer to observable entities, and theoretical terms, such as electron, psi function, and the like, which do not refer to things we see. Theoretical constructs are used to explain the raw data we observe. Examples of theoretical constructs abound. When Freudian psychoanalysts speak about the Oedipus complex, they are not speaking about anything we observe, but are employing a theoretical construct to explain raw data. When Marxists talk about economic imperialism, the latter expression is not something that one sees, but a construct to explain what is actually seen, for example, colonies. When historians talk about the French Revolution, they are not referring to a single event, such as the storming of the Bastille, but rather invoking a theoretical construct to explain a whole series of events. When student radicals of the 1960s talked about the establishment, we realized that they were not referring to a specific person or event, but offering a theory to explain a whole spectrum of events and activities. The interesting thing about theoretical constructs is that they refer to nothing observable, yet we use them to explain what we do observe. Since they refer to nothing observable, they cannot literally be shown. The trick here is to find theoretical constructs already in use and widely accepted by our audience, and to use them as if they were the same thing as raw data. Classification. In addition to presenting raw data, we must classify or organize it. Theoretical constructs are just one way of organizing or classifying information. There are several others. All and some. Avoid using the quantifiers all and some. Do not say, all good union members respond to strike calls. Rather say, good union members respond to strike calls. Why? If you do not use the word all, you can still act as if you used the word all, rather than the word some. You want to avoid using some in your own presentation, because your case will then sound too weak. The word all, even implicitly, is much stronger sounding. At the same time, by not actually using the word, you leave open the alternative of saying that you only meant to say some, especially if your opponents challenge your statements later. Continuum. There are some vague classificatory terms that form part of a spectrum or continuum rather than extremes of a clear-cut division. For example, we can make a clear-cut distinction between animals with a backbone, vertebrates, and animals without backbones, invertebrates. But there is no clear-cut distinction between bald and not bald people. How many hairs must a man have on his head in order not to be called bald? In such cases, you are at liberty to draw the line where it suits your convenience or vanity. Obviously, anyone who challenges your distinctions in such cases is a quibbler. Golden mean. It is part of our general store of wisdom that the mean between two extremes is the most desirable position. Hence, one should always aim to describe his position as a mean, a golden mean between two undesirable extremes. The task here is to identify what constitutes the extremes in the minds of the audience. In politics, we have the following golden means. The moderate is the mean between liberals and conservatives. The liberal is the mean between radicals and reactionaries. The conservative is the mean between fascists and socialists. One final word of advice. There are an infinite number of ways in which you may classify. The only limit is your own imagination.
This concludes the first side of tape 1. Please turn the tape over to continue.
Definition. There's a classic point in every argument where a great outcry goes up that the participants involved should define their terms. We may call this the classical pause, and it is an important one. No one, including you, will really understand your case if you do not know the precise sense in which you are using your terms. There are 3 different ways in which you should be aware of your definitions. First, there is the case of truth by definition. If your terms are defined carefully enough, and if your other factual data are correct, then your case is foolproof. For example, suppose I define the term enlightenment at the very beginning of my argument as a term to cover Western European writers of the 18th century who believed that the method of science would eventually solve all human problems. Suppose further that I specify exactly the geographical boundaries of Western Europe, the temporal dimension of the 18th century, the exact nature of the scientific method, and what I mean by a human problem. Given this definition, I examine the writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I find that he fits every specification except the implicit or explicit trust in scientific methodology. Hence, I may conclude that Rousseau is not an Enlightenment writer. No doubt there will be historians of ideas and others who will immediately attack my exclusion of Rousseau, and then may even show how many have classified Rousseau as an Enlightenment writer. But all of this is irrelevant in the light of my definition. My position remains invincible to all such attacks. Of course, one could ask what value my definition has, but although this is a legitimate question, it is totally separate from the question of whether Rousseau is an Enlightenment writer in view of my definition. Second, there is the matter of equivocation. A specific term is said to be equivocal when it has more than one meaning. For example, the term discrimination has a positive connotation in cases where it means being selective on the basis of certain standards. A man may be said to have discriminating taste in his choice of clothes. Discrimination has a negative connotation in cases where it means to deny something to someone on purely arbitrary grounds. A man is said to discriminate when he refuses to serve blacks in his restaurant. When you use equivocal terms, and there is nothing inherently wrong or even avoidable in these cases, you should be aware of the fact that the term is equivocal and the precise sense in which you intend the term to be taken. It is sometimes advantageous to specify the exact sense in advance if there is no alternative term and if you wish to capitalize on the possible value of that particular equivocal term. On the other hand, it is sometimes advantageous not to specify the exact sense in which you wish a term to be taken. Here your motives may be that the term has a positive connotation to everyone and you wish to capitalize on this, but at the same time you want to leave open some alternative ways of interpreting that term. A third definitional consideration concerns the possibility of really creative thinking, or the use of euphemism. What follows is a list of some of the most creative concepts I have come across recently. They are phrases that incorporate a traditional term having a highly positive connotation and a qualification to cover new cases. The first example, genuine facsimile. Since the word facsimile is present, no one can claim that deception is being practiced here. At the same time, all of the value of the term genuine is achieved. The phrase as a whole simply means a highly detailed imitation. The second example is permanent guest artist. Of course, a guest artist is not a regular or full-time member. Of course, if you are permanent, you are a regular or full-time member. In fact, this is a category of special praise for someone who is otherwise a regular and full-time member, but not bound to rules that apply to others. Third example, the Department of Defense. This is a substitute for the Department of War.